Now, as you heard in the news here on Talk Radio, significant institutional failings by the Football Association meant that it didn't do enough to keep children safe. This is according to the findings of an independent review into historical child sex abuse in the game. The review, which has taken 4 years to complete, investigated child sex abuse in football between 1970 and 2005. It found that the FA did not take the issue of child protection seriously until the mid-90s, which is staggering when you consider the implications and, well, as the fallout we have now seen. There are people in jail. I'm sure it's the last, not the last we've heard in terms of ongoing trials and allegations. Ian Ackley is a survivor support advocate at the Professional Footballers Association. That's the PFA. Ian, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Nice to have you with us. It's a difficult subject. Just explain how you became involved in this.
Well, I mean, it goes back to some 26 years ago in '94, where I first disclosed my abuse against Barry Bennell, and the first prosecution happened in the States, and that's really where it started from. It was down to a young, brave 13-year-old boy who still remains anonymous, but was brave enough to speak up and say that this was happening to him. And I think really that's where it started. That's where we really owe a debt of gratitude.
Did you say the States?
Yes, he was first arrested in America, in Florida, and it was due to a young 13-year-old boy. Bennell invited him back on a tour the year after he'd been on it, and he didn't want to go for obvious reasons, and was brave enough to say something to his parents. I believe his father was a police officer. They took it seriously. He was listened to. And then the investigation ensued in the United States, but no one would corroborate his story. And that's where the police came to me, and I'd made the decision that he was brave, he was bold, and I couldn't stand the thought of no one corroborating, what happened to him. And the fact that Bennell was still out there at large abusing, I just feel compelled to say something at that point.
Because at this point he was still coaching, as I remember, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, and so what you heard of this story, Ian, and thought, hang on, this is terrifyingly familiar.
Well, no, I didn't even hear of it. Actually, I was contacted by the police out of the blue. They'd interviewed somebody else who said they couldn't help, but my name had been passed to them, and they suggested that I might know something about it. And I've been discussing it briefly with my partner, and I was having issues myself, and I hadn't really got the sort of strength to go forwards and believe that I'd be heard. But when this young lad came forward and the police presented themselves with this story, I just felt compelled to say something, and it was my opportunity, and I took it.
Yeah, and I think what you've just said will resonate with lots of survivors of abuse of all kinds, in that you were worried you wouldn't be heard or even believed.
No, absolutely. You got to remember, we now think through the minds of an adult, but we were children at the time.
Of course.
I was prepubescent. I didn't arguably even have the mental or emotional capacity to understand what was going on. And even now, today, children are told to respect their elders, speak when spoken to. And in our formative years as children, we're led to believe by adults that adults are more important than children. We don't really make time to listen to children's conversations because we've got busy days. So we reinforce that actually they're not that important. So Is it a surprise that they don't come to us when they've got serious issues?
True.
I think we've worked to do that.
And then you're dealing with the whole hierarchy thing as well, of somebody in a notable position, someone who's got a respected past, someone who people look up to, someone who is admired within their field. And a kid up against that's an impossible hill to climb, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget, this is someone who can open doors and, more importantly, close them as well.
Yeah.
And your parents are groomed as much, if not more so, than yourself, so that they are complicit with the whole thing. And what I mean is, my parents were encouraged to not let me have friends, girlfriends, to go to music lessons. They were told that it was better for my football career to focus purely on football. And so they isolated me from all of those social activities.
Because he'd advised that.
Normal things that you would in friendships or girlfriends.
Yeah.
And that was another way that he kept me complicit by not emotionally blossoming as a child.
I mean, it's only when you sort of watch a documentary on these things and you start to get into the kind of the deeper psychology of it, you realize just how, I don't even know what the correct word is, Ian, to be honest, but just how thought out abusers take these things. Down to, I mean, you've just articulated brilliantly that this was a man that was making sure that elsewhere, even when you weren't with him, you weren't going to be doing anything that was going to compromise what he wanted from you.
Correct.
I mean, that's
100%.
an extraordinary twisted mind that is in action there. And of course, it wasn't just you, there were others as well, that this was all happening at the same time.
Absolutely, yeah. And operating in plain sight, you know.
Correct, yeah.
And that's what it was, you know, without fear of any detection, because he positioned himself in such a way that he was pivotal, or thought to be pivotal.
We saw in the States, just to go back to America, of course, there was a very high-profile case involving gymnastics, which you will be aware of, Ian, and that was, you know, as horrendous too and sickening. And then over here, the Barry Bennell case, which we're talking about now, along with others. I mean, and this is the crucial bit, isn't it? Because that became a high-profile case. We know that he went to prison, and even while in prison, other, you know, cases and accusations came forward as well. But fair to say, it isn't just him.
No. I mean, look, to think that this is all in the past is naive in the extreme. The fact is that we have never had a prevalence study. We've never had any evidence, statistics to say, where is this happening? How much and to what degree? And only then, I think, really can we start looking with some assurity as to where the gaps are and what we need to do and close them. And I think we just need to keep working hard and diligently to ensure that we don't become complacent, because abusers will continue to try and keep ahead of the game, if you like, and be more manipulative, find more ways of hiding in plain sight and gaining people's confidence.
It's an interesting coincidence that yesterday, as I'm sure you're aware, Ian, the crime bill that went through Parliament did have an inclusion of this area of abuse within it, about sentences for those in authoritative figures such as football coaches and the like. And then today, the findings by the FA. Where does this take us now, though? I mean, so we're talking about it. You're on national radio. We're talking about it. The FA acknowledges it. We know some of the names of the high-profile abusers. What next?
Well, I think that is the $64,000 question, isn't it? I think the report that's come out gives the FA an opportunity to use this as a springboard to go forwards from and show its commitment, its real commitment to making a real difference. I think it has. I think it's come quite a way, but there's a heck of a lot of work to do. And I'd actually like to think that, you know, the corporate sponsors in football have also got a responsibility here. They make a lot of money from this. They're arguably the biggest winners. And actually, you know, you buy the good as well as the bad. And therefore, I think they've got a responsibility to put their hand in the pocket and fund some of this work, particularly down the tiers where, you know, they say that in the EFL leagues, it's okay to have a part-time safeguarding officer. That looks like they're monetarizing everything and saying, well, if you can't afford it, and it's not really that important down in the grassroots levels or down in the semi-pro teams. That isn't the case. So actually, can we get some corporate sponsorship and some unified, joined up thinking around really embedding these principles in our national sport?
And just a very final point. Somebody might be listening to this, Ian, thinking, this is my story. You're talking about something that happened to me. I've never spoken to anyone about it before, for many of the reasons you've just covered, perhaps. What do you say to that person now, Ian? What should they do?
I would say that, look, within football, if it's happened to you, that if you step forward now, you can actually access tangible services for the first time. It's not just coming forward and you'll be heard. You can access therapy within 48 hours and a clinical assessment, and within 7 days, usually, we've got you into a bespoke therapy package. And that's for up to a year, free of charge. We've got over 200 very experienced therapists and counsellors nationwide so that we can provide the same consistent service wherever you are in the country. And we've even provided it abroad to survivors abroad. We have benevolent funds that can be tapped into where people can gain some financial assistance. We have a direction for legal and civil lawyers if they want to pursue civil redress. And we've got advice on debts, housing, benefits, and they'll get to speak to a survivor, myself, someone that understands and gets it. They don't have to explain themselves. The prerequisite is you have to have reported. If you haven't, we can help and assist in that process as well. So if you are out there, please don't sit in silence. Now is the time you can access some real services to help and support you.
Indeed. Ian, thank you. Ian Ackley, abuse survivor and survivor support advocate at the Professional Footballers Association. There is a sense that there is much more of this story to come out. It's a grim prospect, but that appears to be the mood music around this, is that we are really just dancing around the edges of something that could be a lot bigger. It's a terrible story, but thank you to Ian for explaining his own story and what he's doing now in order to try and help other people.